I'm going to share why it is so important to have a diversity of voices really sharing their experience throughout history and across the globe. Let's think about all humans over the past few thousand years that we know of who are known throughout history, either known to be very smart, very service oriented, or have had a profound impact on global culture in some way. Even those individuals that are at the pinnacle of what could be human existence to be able to share their truth with others, even they have a limited perception. And when people of the same type of demographic, all with a similar limited perception, share their truth, it is a truth. It's a very important truth. But our perception, our global perception can start to get skewed if we only hear from one demographic of people with one type of life experience. I'm going to go kind of zoomed out and talk about my own transformation journey and how, even as a child, I have been drawn to philosophy, to religion, to psychology as a seeker of truth. And I will say some of the prominent voices that stuck out for me in my teens were, of course, Jesus, the Buddha, Carl Jung, Aristotle. Big names, and I'm sure they're names that you have heard of before, and they all have literature about them that either they wrote or that's been written about them that I consumed, and they all have credibility in speaking about life in terms of it being closer to the truth than perhaps other random people who have lived. And what is so interesting to me about all of these people being men is that for my own waking up journey and my own transformation process, there is something about their collective message that never completely landed where I was able to feel at home in my spiritual practice. And I'll just give the example that I perceived from their teachings this collective idea of how important it is to serve others and how in serving others you find yourself. I believe Carl Jung quoted that, and that could be consistent across those individuals. And let's also think about the message of disconnecting from emotions, detaching from emotions in order to practice non attachment and to practice feeling at peace. So, both this idea of service and detachment I heard throughout my childhood and my teenage years as elements of truth that I could strive towards to live a more fulfilled life. And what is so interesting about how these messages resonated with me is that I have, from since I was born, been service oriented to a fault, where I've self sacrificed and don't take care of myself, like a lot of women and like a lot of people who lean towards their feminine nature. And similarly, I have heard as a woman that there are things to be ashamed of about my body and my sexuality. And I learned that both in very personal ways and also in cultural ways. So then that those kind of painful but deeper aspects that I didn't consciously perceive that I was learning from culture that I needed to self-sacrifice and that I needed to be ashamed of my body, then tied with these spiritual teachings of needing to detach from outcomes and needing to serve others had a sort of negative effect on how I perceived my own purpose. And it was once I started integrating chakra meditations into my own meditation practice, my world opened up because I perceived myself in a different way, where I was embodying all of the experiences I was having, and I was feeling more spiritually connected the more embodied I went. And what is interesting is that chakras have a woven history that have to do with both some religion and some cultural happenings. And yet, they are most associated with tantric religion, which is one of the only religions that I'm aware of that celebrates the feminine as not just being equal, but being sacred. So, there was something about being able to come home to myself in these teachings as opposed to continue to see myself as inferior or I needed to be ashamed. And it was then that I started seeking out spiritual books by feminine female authors like Kim Chesney, who wrote Radical Intuition, and like the author of the Yoga Sutras, who interpreted the Yoga Sutras from a feminine approach and discussed things like one of the Yoga Sutras that talks about not being greedy, she actually always perceived to mean that there is abundance all around and to be grateful for the abundance. So, this shift in perception of honoring the feminine has had such a dramatic impact on my spiritual transformation because of what it has meant for my ability to love myself and to pour into myself and then to share that love with others. And I share that to say it is so important. It is so important for you to, and your unique perspective, to be seen and heard. And I want to share a little bit about why and what it could mean for you and for the people around you to share your unique life experience. All of the smartest and most influential leaders throughout history have made a significant mark on our current culture today. And yet, any human, even the ones who have been the smartest and the most enlightened and the most aligned, still have a limited perception of truth because of what our capacity is to really understand all of life's hidden treasures and to really grasp all of consciousness. So, that is to say, even the best among us are only able to understand a portion of the truth. And when we get into a situation of having a single demographic own what truth is being perpetuated, then that truth really starts to get skewed. And I'm not the first person to say this. I want to share in my own transformational journey some examples of how a limited viewpoint of what truth was negatively impacted me, and then how expanding out really allowed me to open my mind and heal. So, as a child and as a young adult, I was always drawn to philosophy, to psychology, to religion as a seeker of truth. I wanted to know, what is this life all about? Why are we here? What's the purpose of it? And I came across very influential people. For example, Jesus, Carl Jung, Aristotle, the Buddha, Muhammad, all males that had a very huge impact on humanity and a beautiful impact on humanity. And yet, there's a collective message in what these leaders have all said, who are all men, that really didn't allow me to live my full truth. And I will share two of those messages, and maybe it will resonate with you as well, where I heard as a common thread from Christianity, from Buddhism, from positive psychology, and even from Stoicism, that the way to find joy was to truly be of service to others. That's the first message. The second message is the way to find peace was to detach from your emotions and from your body. They make sense and they sound pretty innocuous at their core. Now, let me share how those messages interacted with who I am and who I was raised to be culturally. I learned from a very young age that it was good to self-sacrifice in the name of serving others. And I quickly became aware of getting attention for being self-sacrificing and became aware of the expectation that I do so. And it became part of my personality as a child and young adult, and it dictated a lot of the decisions I made in my 20s and even early 30s that weren't really aligned with what my actual purpose is. But it was in the name of self-sacrifice and in the name of serving others. And yet, that combination of I need to self sacrifice, along with the message of, well, really to find yourself is to serve others, was very confusing for me. The second message of you need to detach from your emotions and outcomes, that's specifically prominent in Buddhism and Stoicism, interacted to me with this message I got as a child that I should be ashamed of my body and of my sexuality, and that me having any sort of sexual pleasure that was primarily for me was wrong, and that really I needed to make sure I was pleasing my partner first and foremost. And I know that I am not the only woman to have been conditioned to have that belief. And the way that that detachment from my body interacted with the idea that the way to peace was to detach from your body really created a lot of pain for me and a lot of confusion. And yet I continued to search for spirituality and for meaning. And as chance would have it, I was always drawn to the chakras, which have a much more feminine approach. And while chakras have quite an interesting history of weaving in and out of Eastern religion and modern Western pop psychology culture, they were very prominent in tantric religions. And Tantra is the only religion that I'm aware of that celebrates the feminine as not just equal, but as sacred, where many of the other religions that I'm aware of either don't acknowledge the feminine or see it as inferior. And how interesting, since everybody came from a woman, that we have such a hard time celebrating the strength and the mystery and the beauty of the feminine. And yet there I was in that same boat of not really being able to even honor this part of myself, that the feminine part of myself that was wanting to feel embodied and connected and alive. And once I started integrating the chakra meditations, something magical happened for me where I did start to reconnect with my body and reconnect with my various multidimensional self, my dynamic self, that's beyond just the binary of man, woman, but that very much for me had to do with integrating these feminine aspects of myself and honoring them and seeing them as beautiful and creative and sacred. And once I did that, I started seeking more spiritual teachings from women, like Radical Intuition by Kim Chesney, and like an interpretation of the Yoga Sutras by a female author who talked about how, for example, one of the sutras has been interpreted for a long time as not to be greedy, and she interpreted it as there's abundance everywhere. The earth is offering you abundance. And what better way to honor that abundance than to receive it and not ask for more, because there's plenty already for you that the earth is providing. So having this feminine approach really provides a different lens of what the common threads are of how to live a fulfilled life. And so I have learned that when I integrate my chakra meditations and integrate a more feminine approach, what I experience is not just that I need to self-sacrifice, but that I need to serve myself. And that in serving myself and filling my cup, I have an overflow to give to others. And it feels good to give to others from this place of radiance and vibrance. And I experience that it is good to connect with my body and to listen to my body's wisdom and let it guide my decisions and let it connect me to my intuition and allow it to heal me. And as I do this, I feel more embodied, I feel more alive, I feel more connected to the earth around me and to people around me. And I also want to share that if you have a life experience that has to do with being someone different than what society wants you to be, and it gives you a fascinating, unique perspective, that can have really profound impacts on sharing it with others who may be looking for a way to truly express themselves in all of their vibrance and beauty. For me, that very much has to do with being a woman, and for you, it may have to do with a variety of other identities that you embody and that you have learned how to integrate within yourself, and how that integration, which is always a work in progress, but how that integration has allowed you to feel more alive and more joyful and more vibrant in your own skin. So, with that, I encourage you to lean in, open up, tell your story, be seen, be heard. The diversity of experiences and perceptions is the richness, is the healing that we need. Thank you for sharing.